Hey guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Chris and I just got done watching Us. And if you have not watched Jordan Peele's Us, I suggest you click away from this video. This will be completely spoiler filled. I'll be going into the hidden meanings of the movie, explaining the ending, things you might have missed the first time you watched it. And this is a movie I highly recommend people to see right off the bat. Don't let it get ruined for you. Things we'll be covering in this video is one, of course, the ending of the movie and what it means, where the tethered come from, the connection to Get Out, Jordan Peele's other movie, because there is a connection, and also little details that you missed that hinted to the plot's big twist. So without further ado, let's get into the ending for director Jordan Peele's Us. So with Us, it centers around a family, mainly focusing on Adelaide, the mother of this family. We start the movie off with her in 1986, and she is at Santa Cruz Beach with her family. At one point at this carnival, she separates herself from the family, enters a fun house, and she encounters her tethered. As soon as that happens though, the movie cuts away and we get sent to present day, where Adelaide is now grown up, has a husband, has 2 children of her own, and they're headed to their yearly trip to Santa Cruz Beach where they have their vacation. This time, however, Adelaide is a little unsettled because she notices weird patterns and coincidences that remind her of her childhood trauma. It's here where she'll sit down and tell her husband what did happen to her as a child. Now, throughout the movie, it'll be flashbacks. You don't know the full story of what happened to her until the very end. But for the sake of this video and me trying to explain the clues that the movie was trying to hint at you, I'm going to tell you pretty early on. She explains that as a child, she encountered someone that looked identical to her, and that it freaked her out, that she ran away, got back to her family, and then she just never stopped thinking about that little girl. However, the twist of the movie we later find out to be is that the mother was switched. The real mother was sent down below to these tunnels where the tethered live, and now the tethered mom goes on to live a regular life above ground. That's why in one flashback it explains when she's going through therapy after that trauma, she's having trouble speaking because the tethered don't really formulate a language down there. So honestly, it was like being a baby and she'd have to learn every word from scratch. One of the first clues we get that Adelaide is not her true self is when the family gets to the cabin and they're having a little lunch, what looks like typical junk food. She's the only one eating strawberries, which one is a point out that she is different, and 2, that she's most likely vegan. And come on, we just know vegans are evil, come on. Joking aside though, the reason she's vegan is because you have to remember the tethered survive off eating raw bunny meat underground. That's what the bunnies are mainly there for in this movie. They work as the main feeding source for these tethered. So when she was switched out and got to live a normal life and was exposed to all this great food, she was kind of soured on the fact of eating meat. It just reminds her of being underground and in that captivated state, so she turned to veganism. Along with avoiding alcoholic drinks. Also when at the beach talking to her friend there, she mentions, I just have a hard time speaking and talking about myself. Us, the audience, believing it was just because of the traumatic event she experienced, but really it's because she's a tethered and their social skills aren't all the way there. And one of the last big clues that we got was when the mother thought her son went missing for like 30 seconds, she totally flipped out and acted like he was gone for 3 days. Because in her mind, she figured the same thing was happening to her son that happened to her when she was little, that a tethered was switching him out. And honestly, the kid in this movie probably was switched out. I'll get to that in a sec. Now jumping to who are the tethered and their origins. In the final act, when Adelaide is up against herself, we get a full speech of what's going on and where they came from. Real Adelaide, who is now controlling the tethered and has been there underground for about 30-something years, explains that they were a failed government experiment. That apparently the government was working on cloning, which is also why there's bunnies down there, because bunnies were one of the first creatures to be cloned, so they were probably the test guinea pigs before they tried it on real people. The main problem and reason it was a failed experiment is because she mentions that you can clone a body, but you can't replicate a soul, which is the main reason why I made these copies imperfect. Because even though they are connected by one soul to the real person and the tethered person, they're still binded to each other and reflect what they do. I mean, we get to see later on in the film when what people are doing above ground and how that reflects underground. People riding roller coasters, people eating food, people talking to each other, and the mother even describes it herself in her story about a girl and her shadow, explaining when the girl was up eating good food, she was down eating raw rabbits. When the girl was getting nice Christmas presents, she was down on her knees on the glass. That when her tethered found love, she got to have a beautiful family, but downstairs she was forced to get with this person even though she didn't love them, just because her other half fell in love with that person, forced to breed these children she didn't want and didn't love. That's why even though Adelaide was switched early on in the movie, she still gets her family because their lives are parallel and will continue to be that way for the rest of their existence. And the movie does clue you in that it has to do with a government experiment, because at one point the daughter in this movie says, "Oh, did you know that the government puts fluoride in our water to control us?" Hinting at government involvement in this movie towards the plot. If you don't know, quick summary, fluoride in the water is a conspiracy that there's this chemical in water called fluoride. It's healthy for your teeth and scientists have shown no harm to your body, so the government does not remove it from our water supply. However, when someone pointed out that Hitler did the same thing of putting fluoride in the water of his concentration camps, people figured that it's the government's way of making us more persuasive, being able to manipulate us, making us dumber so that we can be easily controlled by them. It's a crazy conspiracy theory, but it is out there if you want more information. And I mean, that is even another layer to this movie. Jumping into why this is happening. So the reason this happens is at the beginning of the movie, one of the first shots we see is the mother, the original mother, sitting down watching TV for Hands Across America. It's a movement that happened in 1986 where people were set to join hands in the fight to end world hunger. It must have been something really moving and powerful for that little girl, because once she is switched out and underground, she uses that exact same movement to eventually take over in the future. This was easy to do because she mentioned early on that the tethered noticed she was different because 1, she had a brain, and 2, she could speak. And that goes into the political metaphor in this movie. The person with the microphone is the strongest person in the room. For years, Adelaide then took the concept of Hands Across America as her takeover plan for the future, organizing these simple-minded, can't think for themselves people into a strong movement that would turn over the world. Just like with any political figure, a Hitler, a president, a king, you put someone in front of a microphone, you speak some truth, and people will follow either for the good or for the bad. The good being the Hands Across America, where they were trying to end world hunger. The bad, this tethered movement, where they're just trying to end the world. Also taking part, and notice that this is something that's only happening in America in this movie, because it was a government experiment by America, so there's not 7 billion people cloned underground. This is something that's solely happening in the United States. And that political metaphor isn't even all that subtle in the movie, because at one point the tethered even call themselves "We're American." 1, hinting at the audience of what this movie's trying to symbolize, but 2, it also plays in part because the whole time Adelaide was staring at her Hands Across America shirt. So that's just something she always believed. We are Hands Across America. We're American. This is also a good explanation for something that was kind of bothering me throughout the movie, but then I liked it towards the end, was why is Adelaide's family taking forever to kill them, but every other tethered kills them right away without hesitation. With the white family in this movie, their tethered show up and killed them within 5 seconds. I mean, that's the toxicity of revenge. She wanted revenge for what she did to her and taking her life away, and wanted to make her suffer. So that explains to me why the tethered took their time to kill that family as opposed to the others around the US. Aside from the political metaphor, there's also a biblical metaphor in this movie. So many layers to it. I mean, for one, the obvious first connection is the whole Jeremiah 11:11. Therefore, thus saying the Lord, behold, I am bringing disaster on them which they will not be able to escape. Though they will cry to me, yet I will not listen to them. Roughly translated to being the rapture, basically being the end of time. So this is Jordan Peele's version of how the world will end. I mean, we get that with Adelaide saying, God brought you to me. The whole science experiment about a soul, which is definitely a biblical connection, because in God, there's very much a thing involved with souls. So this takes the crazy notion that politics and religion are gonna be one in our ultimate disaster. Now to the connection for Get Out. There is basically a connection that connects this universe together. You have to remember that Get Out, even though it was a very racially motivated movie, the overlaying layer of this movie was white people trying to get in black people's bodies because they found them superior in every way and was the best way to live a longer life. This failed government experiment has no real date of when it started in the movie Us. We know it was around since 1986, but I mean, this could have been an experiment done in World War I, in World War II, and without a doubt, I bet you that the family involved in Get Out, their ancestors were involved with the plot of Us in creating those clones. Somewhere along the way, those ancestors realized that this Us experiment is not the way to go because they can't transfer souls. Then making the movement to what happens in Get Out, where two souls can inhabit one body. And that's the connection there. They were the successful experiment in a way. Now, one of the final things I mentioned earlier that a lot of people are gonna miss, and I believe this to be a fact, but it is just my film theory, but there's a lot of things in this movie to back it up, is that the mother was not the only person who was switched out in this movie. The little boy in this movie was most likely switched out not during this movie, but in a previous summer vacation to their home. There's a few clues in this movie that hint that this kid is not the normal kid they know to love and be. One of the first things is he has a new vocabulary, some new language, words that the parents don't understand where he's getting them from. And they make it a big specific point to point out, why are you like this now? Why have you changed? Now remember, the whole time since this boy is on screen, you're actually watching the tethered little boy. Another clue here is the tethered little boy says, I remember playing with this magic trick, but I don't quite know what it does. The reason he thinks he remembers this is because the tethered version of him is playing with something just like that underground. Or for what I'm theorizing, the actual little boy is playing with something like that underground. The one above ground is playing with a magic trick that sparkles, and the one underground is playing with matches. So at some point, the above ground learned the magic trick and how to play with it, while the one underground was playing with the match and burned his face. This probably did damage the boy in a way where he could no longer speak, which is also why my theory would work if they got switched out, since both versions of these kids would be able to speak. And the reason the tethered little boy switching out would be more seamless is because the mom probably taught him English underground, because she does know English and would show it to her children. This is also why the mother, when the little boy with the white mask and red outfit was dying, she screamed no. It was at this point she was starting to realize that that was her true son all along, and also explains why Red Suit Mom didn't kill the son when she snatched him away, because for a long period of time that was her son that she was raising until he was switched. And one of the last big jaw-dropping clues that this kid was actually switched a long time ago was the fact that when he's at the beach, a typical kid, 9 out of 10 kids, would be building a sandcastle. But when one of the white twins accidentally knocks over what he was building and they ask him, what were you doing? He explains that he was building a tunnel. 1 out of 10 kids is a tethered. And that just gives it away to me right there. He is a tethered all along. He's building a tunnel because that's what he lived through most of his life until most recently when he switched out. It's also why he's the only one that can really see that his mom is not who she really is. And probably why he doesn't care and decides to put on his mask and just live with her, because he did the same thing of switching out. That's the real revelation in this movie, not this whole mom situation. But all with that stuff aside, guys, look, I did like the movie. The big thing to me is just when you poke holes at the mythology he created. Real quick, I'll just list off the things that kind of bug me. That's like, I still love this movie, but these little things just make me go, eh. One, why didn't the mom just leave the tunnel in the first place? I mean, throughout this whole invasion, they weren't really stuck to each other. It wasn't like when one mom made a movement, the other one had to make the same movement. I mean, this girl was smart enough to take over a whole continent Hitler style, but she couldn't think to, well, I'll just get out and tell the police, hey, I'm the real person. Also, where did they coordinate to get all these red outfits and scissors? Did the mom have to call up and be like, hey, I need an order of 3 million golden scissors, please, extra sharp? And if that were the case, why not just go give me 300 million AK-47s? Hell, you can even paint those gold too. Little things like that, but I mean, hey, it was entertaining and fun. I had a good time. Let me know what you think about Us. What did you think of the ending for it? If you have a different theory, go ahead and let me know. If you want to tear apart my theory, hey, I'm happy to hear it too. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at 3C Film Review. As always, I'm Chris. Take care.